In this episode, the Middle Ages was a period of major musical change as music began to be written down with increasing degrees of accuracy, from marks roughly indicating melodic shape, to the invention of a four-line stave that allowed for accurate pitch, and finally the use of different note shapes to indicate duration and rhythm. These advances in notation lay behind the rise of polyphony, music with more than one voice part, that is unique to the Western musical tradition. Writing music down enabled performers to read music without having to memorize melodies, and helped standardize the music of the early church, allowing repertoires to be preserved for posterity. Welcome to Music History Podcast by Viola Studio Channel. Sacred Chant. Music and religion have always been closely associated, and singing formed part of the rituals of the early Christian church. For more than 1,000 years, the monasteries and cathedrals that towered over the medieval landscape and society were flourishing centers of music. As the power of the Roman Empire waned, the church became increasingly dominant in medieval society. The monastic and cathedral communities became centers not only of worship but also of learning. The clergy were almost the only members of society who could read and write, and almost all formally trained musicians were priests. The chanted melodies integral to the celebration of the liturgy, the official form of public worship, were, therefore, performed by men and by choirboys being trained for priesthood. Some nuns also received a musical education and participated in singing the services celebrated daily in convents. From speech to song. As Christianity spread from the Holy Land, so did its rites and ceremonies, celebrated in the languages of the communities where it took root, such as Aramaic in Palestine and Greek in Rome. As a result, different chant styles evolved, including the Mozarabic in Iberia, the Gallican in Roman Gaul, and Ambrosian, after Saint Ambrose, a 4th century bishop of Milan. Of these earliest liturgies, only the Roman and Ambrosian chants have survived in a recognizable form. They became known as plainsong, a direct translation of the Latin cantus planus, for the simplicity of their unaccompanied melodies, which were sung in a free, speech-like rhythm, reflecting the unmetrical prose of prayers, psalms, and the scriptures. Early chant probably grew out of the accentuation patterns of spoken Latin, and the natural rise and fall of the voice in reading aloud. Recited on a single tone or with increasingly complex melodic curves, chant was a useful tool for meditation. This music, though unstructured, largely followed the ancient Greek modal system of 7-note octaves made up of 5 tones and 2 semitones, and consisted of 2 types of chant, the responsorial and the antiphonal. The former involved more elaborate, solo chants, with a response from the choir. Antiphonal chants, where singing alternated between choir and congregation, consisted of simpler melodies. These forms were shared by Roman and Ambrosian plainsong, but Ambrosian chant was smoother in its note progression and more dramatic than Roman chant. It also made greater use of melisma, in which a string of notes was sung on one syllable, a style still used in Middle Eastern and Asian song. Two types of liturgy were developed in the early church: the reenactment of the Last Supper, which became the Sunday Mass, and meetings to read from the scriptures and sing psalms, which became the office, or daily cycle, of prayer. As liturgical worship became more ceremonial, music became an important part of the clergy's training, and choir schools were set up to train choir boys to memorize the melodies. Rome's Schola Cantorum, situated close to the Roman papacy that ruled the church, formed the core of this tradition. The school was founded around 600 CE by Pope Gregory I, Gregory the Great, who was credited with composing plain chant that would come to dominate liturgical music. Gregory the Great. Born into a wealthy Roman family, Gregory initially followed a political career. In 578 CE, he was ordained a deacon and later became papal ambassador to Constantinople. On his return, he became abbot of the Benedictine monastery he had founded on the Celian Hill in Rome. Elected pope in 590 CE, Gregory I became known as the father of Christian worship because of his efforts to unify liturgical practice. Gregory also helped to establish Rome as the center of Christianity. Early chant traditions. In the 4th century CE, the split of the Roman Empire and of the Church into Latin West and Greek East, centered on Rome and on Constantinople, gave rise to separate liturgies, each with regional variations. Saint Ambrose in Milan, northern Italy, favored antiphony, with 2 choirs singing alternate sections of the chant, a Byzantine practice that was adopted by the Roman Church. He also gave greater prominence to hymns, many of which he is thought to have composed himself. Other chant traditions in Italy included the florid Beneventan chant melodies, which continued to be sung until the 11th century, when they were supplanted by the increasingly ubiquitous Roman, or Gregorian, chant as it spread across Europe. In Spain, the Hispanic, or Mozarabic, rite was observed under Muslim the Christians' living rule. In 1085, following the reconquest of Toledo, King Alfonso VI repressed the Hispanic rite in favor of the Roman tradition, yet its legacy was strong, and the Mozarabic Mass can still be heard in Toledo Cathedral. The spread of Gregorian chant. In the Western Church, 2 main liturgies had evolved, Roman and Gallican, in Gaul. The Roman liturgy was spread across Western Europe by the monastic orders. In 595 CE, for example, Gregory the Great sent St. Augustine and 40 other Benedictine monks to England to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. The teachings of music theorists, such as Isidore of Seville, also helped to consolidate the use of chant in the liturgy. As the chant repertoire became more extensive, and in order to help the clergy remember the standardized versions of the chant melodies, a simple system of neumes, signs, initially a sequence of dots, strokes, and dashes added above or below the text, was developed to indicate reciting patterns. By the 11th century, a system of notation had been developed to mark notes and pitch accurately. A key moment in the progress toward a single, all-prevailing chant tradition occurred in the mid-8th century, when Pope Stephen II travelled north from Rome to meet Pepin, the Frankish king of Gaul, to seek an alliance against the king of the Lombards. The Pope was accompanied on his journey by some of his singers, and later popes sent members of Rome's Schola Cantorum to teach the clergy in Rouen Cathedral and elsewhere. These early exchanges eventually led to a fusion of the Frankish and Roman plain chant traditions into what is now called Gregorian chant, which is still performed today. After. Despite the best efforts of popes and emperors, different chant traditions persisted. They were standardized only after the birth of the stave. It will be attributed to the Benedictine monk Guido of Arezzo. It allowed the notation of melodic pitch with far greater accuracy. Thank you for listening to Music History Podcast by Viola Studio Channel. Please leave us your comments and opinions.